everybody. This is Kelly. Welcome to another episode of Two Broads Talking Politics. Tonight, I am here with my co-host, Sophie.
Hi, everybody.
And I am here with a friend who is also an artist, which is why she's here with us tonight, and her name is Julia Mills.
Hello. Good evening.
So, the reason we've brought an artist on with us today is that we're going to talk about art and politics and the relationship between the two. As I was prepping for this, at least, I realized that this could be an entire series of podcasts on its own. So we're just going to go wherever the conversation goes, and it may be that we come back to this every few months and talk about all the other aspects that we could be talking about. But for tonight, we're going to talk about whatever we end up talking about. So, Julia, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your art?
Sure. So, goodness, where to start? I guess I was trained in illustration, but then went on to do some fine art, got my master's in fine art, and ended up doing a lot of artwork, surprisingly, about knitting, which I know ties in to how I know you.
How everybody on this podcast knows me.
Yeah, knitting, it unites us all. And so a lot of my work when I was doing that was about women's work. And I wouldn't say it was the beginning of the craftivism movement because it wasn't that long ago, but there was a lot of yarn bombing was kind of big at the time. And so I was doing a lot of painting about knitting. And then now I'm kind of moving back into some illustration work. A lot of it's still about knitting, but I also work on kids books, kids illustrations, kid lit, which is a whole nother brings up a lot of questions for me about representation, and which is kind of political, I guess.
Yeah, and I have one of Julia's prints in my house right now. It's a great knitting piece. So all of the knitters who are listening, which I think makes up over 50% of our audience, please check out Julia's work because it's really fantastic. So, all right, I've been thinking a lot about art and politics recently. I mean, my art is primarily knitting and a wee bit of designing within knitting. And I've been dramatically more inspired to knit and to think about knitting and to use knitting for political purposes since November of last year. And so I'm interested in how politics, I mean, anything in the world going on, but especially how politics and the political climate can influence someone's art, both sort of in positive ways and also potentially in negative ways. So, Julia, I know you said that you think some about this, about, whether or not your work is explicitly political, about how how your work sort of interacts with the political climate.
Yeah, it's, I kind of have to separate what how can I put this? My work as you see it and my making of the work are kind of two separate things to me in my brain. And this election was a huge catalyst for me to start working harder. And not to say to start working politically, but just like it was a kick in the butt. And partially that comes down to really mundane reasons of I don't know how much longer I will be able to dedicate myself and not have a day job. And that really comes down to healthcare. And so in a way that non-political, even though you might look at my art and say, wow, that's not political, it became really personal for me. Like I have 2017 where I know I'm having health insurance. I'm going to work because I don't know what 2018 is going to hold. I don't know if that really qualifies as being political, but it really changed my kind of worldview of myself. Like I needed to work, and I needed to work hard. I need to work fast. And as far as like representation, when I work on kids books, it's really important to me that all different types of people are represented in my illustrations.
Are you thinking about that more now than you had previously?
I am thinking about it as an illustrator. I'm thinking about what stories are mine to tell. Like I really want to see um, people of color who are illustrators. I want to see their work out there. So when I'm working on things, at this point, I'm mostly working on my own projects. So they're my stories or they're things that I'm excited about. But I think about future projects. Would I want to accept something if I felt like it wasn't my story? If I
Mm-hmm.
felt like someone could tell it better than me, because I want to see more representation across the board. If any of your listeners are looking for really good resources, there's a site called We Need Diverse Books. And this is particularly in the kids, mostly picture books, but they do middle grade books as well. And I've tried to really lock into finding other illustrators who aren't white females. A lot of us are white females. So that's been a lot of my research is opening my own eyes to people's work that I maybe wasn't familiar with. And I'm looking at more illustration than fine art.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, so we're all three of us are parents of young children. So, Sophie, I'm wondering if you've been noticing in the kinds of books that you've been buying or receiving for Ren, if you've been specifically noticing that sort of representational issue.
I can't say that my perspective on it has changed that much since the election, with one small caveat. Um, I I've always tried to find diverse books for Ren, and it's been really helpful that my parents found really diverse books for me when I was a kid, and they kept all of my books and then gave them
that
to me
helps.
for Ren. So I haven't actually had to like search out that many because my parents gave me a whole bunch in the 80s to read, and they kept them in their basement and then gave them to me for Ren again. But I will say I've been looking for more representation of Muslim characters now.
Mm.
That was something that I don't think really occurred to me as much before the 2016 election, and now I go out of my way to try and find books that Ren can enjoy because he's only 1.5 that have like clearly Muslim characters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the only one I've really been able to find is my mom sent us and I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, a Curious George book that's about Curious George celebrates Ramadan.
Oh.
And yeah, it's actually really fun and really cute and not too preachy, but he goes through and he celebrates Ramadan with his friend Kareem, and it's it's really great. And yeah, I don't know that I would have been able to find that on my own, or I would have even, I don't know where to look. So yeah. How about you, Kelly?
Yeah, Curious George in general is pretty good at diversity. The more recent Curious George stuff. Um, I know a lot of people don't love Curious George for various other reasons, including the fact that he's not really a monkey. But, I think in general it has been very good at depicting diverse characters. And so I do like that about it. I mean, I'm trying to think through my kids' books, and a lot of their favorite books just don't have humans in them at all, or not
Mm-hmm.
much. We read a lot of Berenstain Bears. And they try to, they do mostly just sort of are friends with other bears. So that might be a little problematic, and we need to think about that some. But we have a fantastic independent local bookstore in our neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and we live in a very diverse neighborhood and also a very international neighborhood. And so they make special effort to stock the kids section with books that represent, all sorts of different cultures and races and religions. And so, I think we've had pretty good luck with finding stuff like that, but it's definitely something that I've become more mindful of that, but also in trying to make sure, I have two boys, and I'm trying to make sure that they read a lot of books with strong female characters.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something else that I've been sort of thinking a lot about more recently than I had been.
Yeah, me too. I guess I also try to find books for Ren that are like I don't know, stereotypically girly.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want him to. And there were a couple of good articles that I read about this. I can't really remember any names in particular right now, but that when we talk about gender neutrality a lot with kids, what we actually seem to mean is that boy things are for everyone and girl things are for girls.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and so I try and like introduce Ren to a lot of girl things. He has a princess castle. He has books that are, pink and have kittens. He has a My Little Pony book that he really likes. He has some My Little Ponies that he plays with. So I try to like buy him books from like the quote unquote girls section of the bookstore, so that he can sort of get that perspective as well and not think, ew, that book is for girls.
Yeah, so we could probably talk about this all night, but
I could talk about books all day.
I'm sure the two of us could as well. So I guess one of the things I'd like to talk about a little is to go back to what you were saying, Julia, about the health insurance situation.
Oh yeah.
I think that that's something that it doesn't immediately occur to people when they think about how politics affects art. But if you stop and really think about it, it makes a lot of sense.
A
So,
lot of artists were able to start working on their art when Obamacare happened, because you could buy health insurance. You
yeah.
didn't have to have a day job, you know.
Are you
It's
hearing
huge.
other artists talk about that piece of it?
I do hear other friends who are artists talk about it, and they are starting to panic a little bit. They're starting to say like, what's happening next year? Because we don't know.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, I also teach. Right now, I don't teach in a school. I have a teaching certificate, but right now I teach adults in libraries and in other places. But it might mean cracking down and really looking for a school job. And that doesn't mean I'll stop working as an artist, but it just changes things. It changes the dynamic.
Yeah, and I think that's true in art and it's important in art, but it's also something that's just a bigger deal in our culture in general, right? We're seeing a lot more of the kind of jobs that people are doing that aren't necessarily working, 9 to 5 in a company that's providing health insurance for you. So people
Yeah.
driving Uber or, whatever.
I
Uh,
think they
Mhm.
call that the gig industry.
The
yeah,
gig
yeah.
industry, that's a whole another topic you can bring in.
And I think we were moving that way as a culture anyway, but then putting Obamacare into place really allowed that to flourish. And
Hmm.
it's really problematic to take something that significantly impacted our economy and then to just sort of yank it away and say, nope, sorry. I mean, I don't know how any of the gig economy works once you take away the availability of health insurance.
Well, I think it
I
opens up, I think it shows the weakness of our private health insurance system really immediately now because the gig industry has been allowed to flourish with Obamacare.
Yeah.
Now, if you take it away, it's really obvious that our system doesn't work if you base people's access to healthcare on private insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked all kinds of different jobs pretty much solely for benefits.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in a restaurant. I mean, yes, I got paid, but the benefits were the reason I went to that job. I worked in an office, and the reason I went to that job were benefits. And I think you would hear that from a lot of artists,
Mm-hmm.
that they've taken jobs that are way below their skill level, or their even the pay isn't great, but they've taken them because if they have those benefits, they can run home and paint when they get home.
Yeah, that's and I know that's true of writers as well. So it's something I think we need to think about what that means for our culture. If obviously we're in favor of health insurance for everybody on this podcast anyway, but